All right, we're going to look at Lesson 7. It follows straight on from Lesson 6. We've just looked at the Day of Atonement. What day in the year is it? It's the 10th day of the 7th month. It's forever, and so it must be fulfilled spiritually in Christ. Matthew 5:17 and 18. And we looked at the ceremony and everything that was done on that day, and I trust you've got a really good handle on that. We'll keep coming back to it on the different doctrines because it's important in every doctrine that we do. And so we go on to Lesson 7, the progression of atonement, propitiation, mercy seat. Now, we saw last lesson that this is where propitiation was made. The blood was put on the mercy seat. We saw that. Before we go any further, however, you'll say to yourself in the back of your mind, look, every time he talks about propitiation, he says mercy seat. Well, I'll tell you why I do that, because when we come to the New Testament and we deal with this idea of propitiation in the New Testament, we find that the word propitiation is used in the Greek, and the word mercy seat is used in the Greek. And when we look it up in the Greek, they're both the same word. Right? Propitiation and mercy seat in the Greek are the same word. So it's no wonder I keep saying propitiation, mercy seat as if they're interchangeable, because they are. Right. So have that in the back of your mind when we come to the fulfillment of this part of this doctrine of atonement. When we come to the fulfillment of atonement, we expect mercy seat to be a part of it. Right. As we have seen, when the high priest went once a year on the Day of Atonement into the Holy of Holies, he faced the law in the ark and the God of the law above upon the ark between the cherubims in the place of judgment. A holy God was demanding his righteous demands be satisfied. That's what atonement was about. God, in his Shekinah glory, was above upon the ark between the cherubims, and inside the ark was the law. And so this is how it worked. God looked to the law and he said to the law, are the people guilty? And the law said, yes, they're guilty. That's what I'm here for. I'm to diagnose the problem. The problem is sin. They're sinners. And God says, well, then they must be judged. And so God's righteous demands regarding sin have to be satisfied. Now, this is the day they're to be satisfied on, the Day of Atonement. And so to satisfy these demands, the high priest had only, first of all, himself. He was to be the intermediary. His office, the priesthood. His clothes, which were a sign of righteousness, imputed righteousness. He had the censer of coals on his arm, and he had the blood of the sin offering, and he had the incense. Like he had the censer of coals on this arm, the incense in his hand, and then he had the blood of the sin offering. So you say to yourself, how could this possibly be enough to satisfy the righteous demands of a holy God? What was the significance of it all? Well, as we look at it objectively and look at the situation, it's clear that in and of itself, this whole ceremony of the Day of Atonement has no real power to deal with the sin problem and to satisfy God's demands. It's obvious that its significance is that it foreshadows the real thing. It's to give us a picture so that when the real thing happens, we can be absolutely positive that we've understood it and got it right. And so it foreshadows, it's a type of what's to come. And it tells us that there is something to come and that we can be sure that there is something to come. So how could some animal's blood sprinkled on the mercy seat mean anything? Well, to understand, we must understand the mercy seat and understand what it's about. And we'll look at it this way. First of all, its position. Exodus 25:21. Go back and look at that. Exodus 25:21, because this is a very important part of this teaching. Exodus 25:21. Yes. And thou shalt put the mercy seat above upon the ark, and in the ark thou shalt put the testimony that I shall give thee. And so this is very specific. God says you'll put it above upon the ark. And so it was the lid of the ark of the covenant. Now the ark of the covenant, we said, was a chest, a box, a rectangular box. And the lid of it, above upon it, was the mercy seat. And then on the mercy seat were the cherubims, and then God's Shekinah glory. So it was the lid of the ark. It's what closed the top of the ark over, and inside was the law. So we have the ark containing the testimony. Now that's the law, the 10 Commandments, but it's the whole of the law is encompassed in this idea that it was contained within the ark. And so the ark, Exodus 25:10-15, I'll just read that so we get a picture, because there's an important thing here. And ye shall make an ark of shittim wood. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length of it, and 1 cubit and a half the breadth thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the height thereof. And thou shalt overlay it with pure gold. Within and without shalt thou overlay it, and shall make upon it a crown of gold round about. So I talked to you about that. It's a box, but on the top of it, it had like a crown. You know, our crown and a coronet. So it had that all round the outside of the top of it. And thou shalt cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in the 4 corners thereof, and 2 rings shall be on the one side of it, and 2 rings on the other side of it. And thou shalt make staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold. And thou shalt put the staves into the rings by the sides of the ark, that the ark may be borne with them. The staves shall be in the rings of the ark, they shall not be taken from it. And thou shalt put into the ark the testimony which I shall give thee. So we've got the ark containing the testimony, the law. The ark is made out of wood, and it's overlaid with pure gold. And that's very interesting. When we look at the ark and say, the ark itself, is it a type? Does it point forward? And it does. It points forward to Christ in this very special way. When we look in the Old Testament, we see that when it's made of wood, now what is wood a type of? Well, it's a type of humanity. And so we see that when we look at the ark, it's a type of Christ in 2 ways. It's a type of Christ in his humanity, and then it's overlaid with gold, and gold is a type of Christ's divinity. And so we look ahead to Christ, and we find that the ark is telling us that Christ is not only going to be fully man, he is also going to be fully God. Now we call this the hypostatic union. You don't need to get too uptight about names like that. It means that God, when he sent Christ, Christ was born of a woman, so he was fully man, and yet he was divine, he was fully God, and so he was the God-man. And the Ark of the Covenant is the perfect type of that, and it points us ahead to the time when Christ comes and exactly fulfills this type of the ark to perfection. Then notice that the law was in the ark. Now, what was the law there for? Well, it was diagnostic, remember? It was to tell us what? That we're sinners. Tell us how far we fell. It was a symbol of judgment. And so, if you like, it was the prosecutor in a court case. It said, these people are guilty and this is their crime. And it was a symbol of judgment. To meet God's righteous standards, mankind must keep the law, right? He must be blameless before the law. But even if he kept the law absolutely perfectly from when he was born to when he died, that wouldn't be enough, because we have Adam's imputed sin to us. We are born in sin. We don't sin because we're sinners. No, we don't. We're not sinners because we sin. We sin because we are sinners. We are born sinners. We've got imputed sin from Adam. So to make God's righteous demand, mankind must keep the law. Of course, no one can keep the law, so instead of saving mankind, the Lord judges and condemns mankind. In this judgment and condemnation, mankind is forced, led by the law, to Christ. Right? That's the idea of the law, to actually lead us to Christ. The law says we are guilty, and we say, well, can you fix the problem? And the law said, no, go to Dr. Grace. Remember I talked about Dr. Law and Dr. Grace. And we go to Dr. Grace, which is Jesus Christ, and he has the answer to the problem. And the answer is atonement. Our sins can be covered. Mankind cries out to God for mercy, but the law has no capacity for mercy. Now I want you to think about this. The law in no way can have mercy. It can't provide mercy. It doesn't allow for mercy. It is just the law, and it just makes the demand of perfect righteousness, which we don't have, and the law can't have mercy. So mankind is caught between the two. So he cries out to God for mercy, but he can't get mercy through the law. But the ark is a symbol of deliverance and atonement, isn't it? Remember back to Noah in Genesis 6, the ark was completely covered inside and out with bitumen. Right? Now what's atonement? To cover, specifically with bitumen. And so we would say, the ark of the covenant. Now Noah's ark brought deliverance. Surely when God put this ark in place, he had deliverance in mind. And of course he did. Right, but this ark contains the law. The law is inside it. It's there to accuse us to God. And where's God? He's between the cherubim. And so it's there. Every time we stand before the ark, there's God, and he says, well, I'm demanding the satisfaction for sin, and my demands are righteous. Now, I look to the law, and the law says you're a sinner. Right. So, the law contains this, the law is there, and it's condemning us to God. It's saying we are guilty. The judgment comes from God, and his presence and his glory abide above the ark between the cherubims. So we have the law condemning mankind and accusing mankind below, and God in all his righteousness and glory demanding satisfaction above, and man in between with nothing he can do in and of himself to appease God's anger, to answer the law, to satisfy God's righteous demands, or to give satisfaction for his sin. So what can mankind do? Well, one thing he can do, he can cry out for mercy. And that's exactly what he does. And the wonderful thing is that God, in his love, has shown mercy. And this is how he's shown it. Between the law, inside the ark, and God's glory, up between the cherubims, his Shekinah glory, is the mercy seat. And this is why it's called the mercy seat. This is the only position where it could be of any use. This is the place where mankind comes to the end of himself. He comes to face God and face the law, and he says, there's nothing I can do in and of myself. No works can save him, nothing can commend him to God. All his righteousnesses are as filthy rags. The Old Testament message of salvation is exactly the same as the New Testament. We are saved by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone, and Christ is our mercy seat. So now the law, to judge and condemn us to God, must come through the mercy seat. It has no alternative because the mercy seat is between. This is the wonderful truth here. The law is in the ark, and God is above, between the cherubims in his Shekinah glory, and the mercy seat is in between. So for the law to touch us, the law must come through the mercy seat. Now, it has no alternative as the mercy seat is between. As the lid of the ark, the mercy seat is a covering, an atonement for the ark. So it's a type of atonement anyway. The ark contains the law. The law is inside the ark, right? The law reveals sin. That's what it's about. It's diagnostic. It's to tell us we are sinners. And the mercy seat covers both the ark and the law, right? So the mercy seat is an atonement for both the ark and the law. The ark contains the law, and the mercy seat contains the law. Now, there's two different ways of looking at it. The ark contains the law, so the law is inside the ark. But the mercy seat contains the law. It makes it stay there, where it needs to be, where God intends the law to be. That's what he made the law for, to be there, inside the ark. While ever the mercy seat is in place, the law can be nowhere else other than in the ark. Now, if you take away the mercy seat and the law is free to condemn everybody, the law is just free to condemn. That's all the law can do. It can't save, it can only condemn. So take it outside of the ark and take away the mercy seat, and the law condemns everybody. But with the mercy seat in place, the law is kept in its proper place and it fulfills its proper function. That's what the mercy seat's there for, to contain the law, to make it stay where it should be. The mercy seat is where atonement can be made, because it's got everything in place for it to be made. The position is right. The high priest came into the Holy of Holies to face God, who required satisfaction for sin. The high priest brought the blood of the sin offering to provide that satisfaction. So we've got a substitutionary sin offering to make satisfaction for sin. The high priest brought the blood of the sin offering to provide that satisfaction, to prove that the death of the sacrifice. The law demanded more. In a way, it demanded everything. It demanded that the wages of sin be paid immediately and fully. And that's what the law demands. That's what it's there for. It was only as the mercy seat intervened that the offering could be made. And so we understand the power of the mercy seat. First of all, the position is very important. Then the power of the mercy seat. Its function was to provide mercy. Mercy is God not giving us what we do deserve. God put it in the tabernacle to make it possible for the high priest to enter his presence with the blood of the sin offering. Without mercy, there is only condemnation. Without God making a way for it to be possible for sin to be covered, and thus providing mercy, there was only condemnation. There was nothing else we could do. The priest sprinkled the blood on the mercy seat, and without the mercy seat there was no place to put the blood where it would be any use. The mercy seat was the intermediary, the go-between, between the law and God. When the blood was sprinkled on the mercy seat, it provided a covering for sin. And so this is how it was. God looked on his people, and he saw the blood of the sin offering on the mercy seat, and the law was covered. And this is what atonement is. God looked well, like mankind came before God into the Holy of Holies, and God said, I demand satisfaction of my righteous demands regarding your sin. And the high priest put the blood on the mercy seat, and God looked to the law and he said, where do these people stand? And the law cried, guilty, guilty, they're guilty. And God said, let me look at that. And he said, no, when I look to the law,